Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews. Today we get a chance to look at another one of these Kid Galaxy sets. It's something that is very hard to find, shockingly. They're extremely complicated to get a hold of. I can't really find any stores online that really sell the Kid Galaxy figures except Amazon, and more often than not, they end up being pretty expensive, which is kind of depressing because they honestly produce some pretty cool looking figures, maybe not the most scientifically accurate figures, but decent nonetheless. And if you look up here at this little tag, you'll see that I actually bought this at Ollie's for about 10 bucks, which is awesome. Ollie's is a very cool bargain outlet, basically, store that I think a lot of people would probably have near them, at least in the United States. So if you happen to have one of these stores near you, definitely check it out and see if you can locate some of these very cool figures. But in this set, we have bigger ones than the last set. We had previously reviewed a set of, I believe, 4 figures when it came to the Kid Galaxy figures. This one has 3, but they are much larger than they were previously. This one is the Argentinosaurus, and if you can recall in the last review I had of Kid Galaxy, there was a non-articulated, much smaller version of that exact figure. Then we've of course got the Styracosaurus, which I'm sure looking at it by now you were able to tell what that was. And then we've got, shockingly of all incredibly obscure species, the Australovenator over there. So very, very cool as far as the species go. You've got a random little pterosaur over here in the corner, and the Schleich Rex kind of roaring out over here, the Papo Rex roaring out over here as far as the running Rex. I don't understand why companies like this go ahead and use figures from other companies to promote their lines, other than the fact that their other figures are much nicer than what they produce. And then on the back we've got some random information of each of the species, which is pretty cool, even though I wouldn't put too much faith into anything that they actually say on here, because I believe the last Kid Galaxy set that I had stated some very crazy things about the dinosaurs or species or whatever that I had included in that one. This one doesn't look too far off as I'm kind of glancing over them, but regardless, I'm pretty excited to take a look at these figures again, as they are fairly hard to find. So let's go ahead, break this open, and take a look at them. So here is the Australovenator. If I can get him to stand, there we go. Here is our Argentinosaurus, and here is our Styracosaurus now, blocking the Australovenator. But, so, whoa, hold on, look at those terrible screw holes. They caught me totally off guard because I didn't see that before. Regardless, they are interesting looking figures, potentially look better inside the box, I think, but some of them are pretty nice, like the, I guess you could call it an Argentinosaurus, even though it doesn't really look like one. Regardless, I'm still pretty interested to see these guys up close, so let's go ahead and get a closer look right now. So if we start with the one that I was probably the most interested in, it would be the Australovenator. You can see, looking up here at the head sculpt, it's pretty nice, honestly. You can see that there is definitely some sloppiness. It looks like some of this pink has run up onto the teeth. Oh, there we go, we were able to scrape that off. The teeth are actually painted with a fairly decent color. It's like a yellowish color, so it's somewhat realistic as far as what the color of the teeth would probably be. The tongue has some nice, sort of decent detail in there, but it's kind of just been given like a pink wipe of paint. There's no real paint on the side of the tongue, just over the top, which is not really that great, but it's still not that bad. The eye is actually painted really quite nicely with a brown and then a black pupil, and you can see it shining and glistening really beautifully, actually. Both eyes look really good, and there's no sloppiness or anything on them. Oddly enough, we have the name of the dinosaur right here on the neck of all places. I have no idea what would go through somebody's mind to think, I'm going to stamp the name of my dinosaur on its neck and sell it like this. You should have placed it down here somewhere not so noticeable, but okay, I guess whatever, Kid Galaxy. I don't make your figures. As far as looking like the Australovenator, I mean, it's sort of alright. It's not really, there's no scientific accuracy here, I can say that, for any of these figures. I'm not sure that they've ever truly opened up a dinosaur book and actually studied any of these figures that they make, but I think as far as looking similar to the species that they are trying to copy, this one's not too far off. It's not perfect either, though, but it's definitely much closer, I think, than this Argentinosaurus is. But as we move down the neck, you can see it's got this kind of striping. It's like a light, almost cream color that's surrounded and outlined by a brown. You also see that up here on the snout. You can see that there is some decent sculpt as you come down the neck as far as the skin texture. The sculpting and the detailing, honestly, is not bad as far as the very minute details go. Beautiful creases in the skin here of the arms. The nails are not painted, unfortunately, but they look alright as far as the sculpt and everything goes. I think that if this had better paint, this would be a pretty nice looking figure. You can see a few osteoderms and stuff here on the side of the animal. Some more nice, decent looking skin texture, I will say. And you can see that the stripes run down the entire length of the figure and stop right here. They really do look quite nice, and I think they contrast beautifully with this gray that is the body color of the figure. Really nice muscle tone here in the rear leg. You've got a beautiful kneecap there, some nice calf muscles, really nicely sculpted foot as well. So I think the detail and sculpt of this figure is actually quite nice, and being such an obscure species that you don't see get figures very often, I'm pretty excited actually about it. When you come out the length of the tail, and even that's pretty decent. There is articulation in the tail, so you've got a swivel there. You've got articulation in the legs, the arms, and the neck. Shockingly, there is no articulated jaw, which is weird. But if you look at the opposing side, we've got some Hasbro-like screw holes here and there, which do take away from the figure, but at least there's only 2 of them. It could definitely be a lot worse. This is actually quite the nice looking figure, honestly, and I'm definitely impressed by this one. Then we've got the Styracosaurus. You can see that there is all sorts of sloppiness as far as the paint goes here in the mouth. Yeah, definitely really sloppy as far as that goes. It looks alright in there, and with a better paint job, it could have been pretty decent. You've even got the skin flap there. Nice detail in the beak. You can see the nostrils are sculpted nicely, and the overall skin texture looks pretty decent. Some pretty nice detailing around the eye. The eyes are painted with a blackish color, but again, are glossed quite nicely. There's no real sloppiness or anything. For some reason, the entire head has a bit of a glossy appearance to it. You see that shine as I turn it. I don't know why that is. You've got the horn up here on the snout, which looks pretty nice. You can see some cracks and crevices throughout the horn, giving it some decent detail and sculpt. Almost a heart-like design here on the frill, and it looks really nice actually. I definitely like the paint scheme that they've gone with as far as the head sculpt goes, and there is quite a bit of paint variation. You can see it change to like a grayish color here, but then a creamy color up on the snout, and that creamy color on the snout ends up here on the inside of the frill, and then you've got this rim of like this reddish brown. So it does look quite nice. I also like that the spikes up here on the back are a different coloration than the horn that you see on the front of the snout, which is something you don't see too often as far as differentiating the horns from the spikes on the frill. And you can see there is some nice articulation in the neck, which is actually pretty sweet, honestly. I really quite like that. The sculpt in general is alright, it's just not that great for a Styracosaurus. We've got some decent sculpt and detail here in the leg. It's almost the opposite of a Mattel figure because the feet are significantly too small, I think, than what they should be, whereas Mattel usually has bigger feet, but that's interesting for sure. Now here is an area where I'm not a big fan of. I definitely don't like this paint. I think the paint of the body back here ends up looking really, really ugly, and looks very much so like just paint kind of splotched all over the figure. It doesn't look like body color. I think it looked a lot better down here on the Australovenator, but not so much on this one. It's definitely really ugly as far as that goes. And primarily the body's just this very dark brown, but there's so much more color variation in the face, which is a little upsetting because I think the overall head looks good as far as the paint. Maybe not as far as accuracy goes for a Styracosaurus, but it's not too far off, but this is just ugly down here. The sculpt and detail does look decent though. You can see the feet look pretty nice. Some nice muscle tone here in the rear leg. Got the very nicely sculpted tail. Again, when we come over to this side, you can see that there are screw holes, and this side has 4 of them. So that's quite a bit more than we saw in the Australovenator. But even still, I mean, it's really not that bad of a figure. I actually quite like it. It's not perfect, but we don't get too many Styracosaurus figures, so I guess I'll take it. And as far as articulation, of course, we've got the legs. Front and back all move. The tail is on a swivel, but it's pretty stiff. And then, of course, the neck articulation. So that's really quite decent for a figure like this. You don't get this kind of articulation too often with a Ceratopsian. And then you've got the Argentinosaurus. but you can see that it looks pretty nice as far as the detail goes. We have actually reviewed this figure before, and it is exactly the same as far as everything. I like the teeth coloration. Again, it's a yellowish color, so it looks a little more realistic than a bright white, but this figure is exactly the same as it was previously, except it's now larger and has articulation. It has the exact same paint scheme and everything, which I really do quite like it. There's a little sloppiness right there. I really do like the paint scheme. I think it looks really nice, really natural on the figure. And the sculpt and detail on this dinosaur is also quite nice. It doesn't really look too much like an Argentinosaurus, but it does still look really quite fun. It almost looks like a pretty nice Apatosaurus. The tail appears to be a little bit different than the last one. The last one I think was dragging on the ground. This one, the tail is up a little higher, but if you come from this point up, I believe everything else is pretty much the same. So if you want to see a more detailed look at the sculpt of this one, you can check out the previous Kid Galaxy review that I did. But it does look quite nice, it looks quite natural. Articulation again in the neck, legs, front and back, and then the tail is also on a swivel. You've got some screw holes on this one again, but not that bad. It looks like there's, like 2 of them, I believe. So it could definitely be worse. And again, it's another fairly appealing looking figure. Now, as far as sizes go on these figures, they are definitely not to scale with each other. That is for sure. But if we go from the tail to the head of this Argentinosaurus, it's about 9 3/4 inches, or about 25 centimeters in length. And for a height, get the head up nice and tall, about a little over 6 inches, or about 15.5 centimeters. So it's actually quite the decent size for sure. The Australovenator, from the tail to the head, about 9 inches or 23 centimeters. And the highest point is probably the head there, and it's just under 4 inches or around 9.5 centimeters. And then if we go to the Styracosaurus, from the tail to the head, about 8.5 inches, maybe close to 8 3/4, or about 22 centimeters. And for the height, you're seeing it at about 4.5 inches or 11.5 centimeters. For a size comparison, there is the Papo T-Rex, and you should now have a pretty good idea that these are fairly decent sized figures. The Styracosaurus and Argentinosaurus for sure. The Australovenator is a bit smaller, kind of like a middle-sized dinosaur, but again, they're definitely decently sized, and next to the Papo Rex, you should be able to get a pretty good idea of that. So as far as this Kid Galaxy 3-pack goes, I am actually quite impressed. I mean, there is definitely some ugliness to the figures. The paint apps on some, like the Styracosaurus, are terrible. It really looks bad, but then the Australovenator looks pretty decent. I definitely quite like the paint scheme on it. And then you've got the Argentinosaurus, which looks very appealing as far as the paint scheme goes. The sculpt and detail on all three are pretty decent as well. Nothing is bad, honestly, on any of them. I mean, the Styracosaurus is probably the worst as far as the detailing goes, because I feel like on the overall body, there's not really much going on as far as the detail. But the other two definitely look quite a bit nicer, but none, I would say, are really bad. They're not that great. They could be better. As far as species go, really cool that they decided to do an Argentinosaurus, even though it doesn't really look that great. As far as an Argentinosaurus goes, I think it more closely resembles like an older Apatosaurus. The Australovenator definitely is awesome. That's super cool to have one of those because it's so super obscure. You just do not see that figure being made very often. And a Styracosaurus is a fairly common ceratopsian, but as far as figures go, more often than not, we somehow get skipped when it comes to that ceratopsian, so it's really cool that they decided to make one of those as well. Definitely much more impressive than the last set of Kid Galaxy figures I reviewed, but still nothing as good as Papo, Safari Ltd, Collect Day, nothing like that. But as far as getting 3 really cool dinosaur figures for a pretty darn cheap price at Ollie's, I am absolutely happy with this purchase. So again, if you are interested in this set, I would say check your local Ollie's, as they had quite a bit of these, along with actually some animal sets as well, which looked really cool and I was tempted to buy also. As far as buying one online, I don't know for sure how readily available they are. I'll give them a search, see if I can find them, but your best bet is probably to just head to Ollie's and buy them there. Regardless, Please make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell to be notified of any future videos, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.